Thank you so much for taking the time, man. I really appreciate you.
Thanks for having me on.
Of course. I'm sure most of the audience probably knows who you are. For anybody that doesn't know, can you just give a little bit of your background and what ultimately led you to Elvis?
Well, I think most people might know me as the Gnostic guy, the host of Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio, and some books on Gnosticism, like Voices of Gnosticism, Other Voices of Gnosticism. So that's been more or less my Clark Kent job the last few years since 2018. But
Hmm.
the Elvis book kind of came out of nowhere. I never was a fan of Elvis. I consider myself a Beatles person. And I thought that would be my life for the rest of my meat sack incarnation. But sometimes, as John Lennon said, life happens when you're busy making other plans. Or what's the saying? Man plans, God laughs. So all of a sudden, pretty sudden, in summer of 2022, this sort of voice, this feeling, this entity came over me named Elvis. And through a series of, you might say, urgings and synchronicities and other strange happenings, I couldn't get Elvis out of my head.
Yeah.
And he continued to stay with me, and I became sort of obsessed with his persona for quite a few months. And I remembered briefly knowing about his occult or alternative spirituality life, and that sort of came back to me, something I'd done 10 years before, but didn't think too much about it. But this was very powerful, waves upon waves. And I finally surrendered to this voice. And on a cold morning of February 2023, I just sat down and started writing the books and the book. And it came out of me. You might say I became quantum entangled with Elvis, as I like to say. It's my Elvis dad joke, I
Hmm.
suppose. And it took 3 months, and the book just came out of me. And then a few months later, I took it to a publisher and they were happy to take it on and just came out about 2 months ago.
Wow. So you weren't previously like much of a fan of Elvis, were you? Dang.
No, like I said, I was always a Beatles person.
Yeah.
I didn't think anything of, as I got older and I studied more history, I appreciated his impact
Yeah.
on the music industry, which is invaluable. Without Elvis, most of the music we listen to today would not exist. He really is the font of what we call popular music today. And I remembered his alternative spirituality and appreciated that and his impact on American culture. But that was really it. That was really it.
So when you started digging like into his life, what were you like starting to find when it came to the occult?
Well, it was kind of like how deep the rabbit hole goes. Again, I remember, I think it was 2013, I read a book by Gary Tillery called The Seeker King, and it was published by the Theosophical Society. And it was a traditional bio, but it did include a lot of the, again, alternative spirituality of Elvis. It included some of his extraterrestrial experiences and so forth.
Hmm.
But that was a time when I was sort of studying the alt history of rock musicians and Hollywood stars. So it
Yeah.
was one of those I learned about it and filed it away. Like, all right, David
Yeah.
Bowie is influenced by Kabbalah, Jimmy Page by Thelema, the
Hmm.
Beatles by Hinduism, yada yada yada. And it was just one of those, like, it was part of my learning curve as I was learning about alternative spirituality. But I just filed it away, and part of me was victim, I don't know about victim, guilty of doing what a lot of us do. We look at actors and musicians and we go, oh, yeah, yeah, they embrace all this eccentric stuff because it helps their art and they have to be weird on purpose. And we just accept it and
Yeah.
we go about our days and we kind of overlook how important perhaps this spirituality was for them. I mean, without Hinduism, we wouldn't have Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band or Revolver, or,
Hmm.
without Kabbalah, David Bowie might not have reached the heights he did in the 70s. Without the Lima, Jimmy Page might have not been as an incredible guitarist and composer as he was in the 70s. So we kind of just accept it, but we don't go deeper. It's kind of a societal thing. And again, I'm guilty of it, but when you start when I started going down into Elvis, I just started finding even much more than the Seeker King. Much more has come out, and again, the rabbit hole even continues today. I'm finding more stuff even now that the book's out.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. It seems like it's in a way kind of endless. Where do you think it started? Because I think it's super interesting that the fact that he was supposed to be a twin.
You could really see it in an almost mythical Greek tragedy way. From when he was born, he was born in Tupelo, Mississippi on June 8th, 1935. And they lived in this very austere house, no indoor plumbing, not much else. Everybody was poor in the South in those days during the Great Depression.
Mhm.
And there was no doctor. They couldn't afford a hospital or doctor, not even a midwife. And Gladys, Elvis's mother, was having a very hard birth. While this was happening, Elvis's father, Vernon, went out for a cigarette, and this blue light just floated over the house, and it was very alien. All sounds stopped, from the wind to the sound of coyotes to everything. It's like everything froze, and it just hovered over the house. And Vernon freaked out, as he should have, and I'm sure he threw a cigarette on the ground and he ran back inside the house. And then he had sort of a memory wipe because uh, Elvis's older twin, Jesse, was born, but he did not make it. He was stillborn. Then 35 minutes later, Elvis comes out. So those two events were already huge for Elvis, because I don't know if the alien light was dropping off the next space messiah, or was it some sort of heralding star like you see in the birth of great historic figures like Jesus, or Alexander the Great, or even Genghis Khan, Buddha, you name it. There's always a story of a light show when these figures are born.
Yeah.
But whatever it was alien. It was from another world. And yeah, losing Jesse was a huge, huge effect on Elvis. You may think, well, they were babies, but today psychology recognizes it as a twinless survivor syndrome. When a twin dies at birth, the other one forever is afflicted with survivor's guilt and a sense of something is lost, a sense of emptiness. And that really drove Elvis. Twinless survivors tend to be seekers because they want to know what happened. Why did we have the same birth, but
Mhm.
he didn't make it and I didn't make it? Why did we have to be so poor? If he'd been born at the hospital, could we have saved Jesse's life? And they are seekers, and I compare them to other twinless survivors like Liberace, Philip K. Dick, Peter Whitmer, the drummer of the Turtles, and these twinless survivors are seekers, but they are also have a dark side. They are prone to workaholism. They are prone to drug addiction. They have problems connecting with other human beings. So from the get-go, Elvis was almost meant to be Elvis, and Jesse became sort of Elvis's daemon or higher self. He would have visions about Jesse. It would appear in dreams. It would be a voice that would guide him to make the right decision in his career and at school and so forth. And it was really the main reason Elvis was alive, or what gave him purpose. I mean, Philip K. Dick, the author, said the same thing. He lost his twin sister, Jane, and he said everything he wrote, every book, every line was trying to find out where was Jane and why did she die. So very powerful events that started Elvis on his path.
Was he like vocal publicly about like the blue light or like these visions with Jesse?
Not so much, because Gladys went to the hospital and she was told that she could never conceive again. And for
Mhm.
some reason, she really withdrew. And she both withdrew and she became very possessive of Elvis, which was very abusive, very damaging to his psyche. It's what people call it helicopter parenting, but it's
Yeah.
called lethal enmeshment. When the mother's so possessive, it doesn't allow the child to grow or have healthy ego boundaries. So the child becomes the proxy husband, the king of the household, but he's also very naughty because he tries to sneak away from this possessive mother, and it is damaging. And again, people like that victims of lethal enmeshment tend to be, guess what? Workaholics, drug addicts, and cannot make contact with other people, but they also tend to be spiritual. So again, it seems Elvis was meant to be Elvis. But Gladys didn't want to talk about him. She wouldn't even visit Jesse's grave. Elvis had to go there with his father and kind of sneak there. And
Mhm.
she would mention something like, oh, he's with the angels here and there. But it was really Elvis who tried to keep the memory alive when he could. And he really never had anybody to talk about it. I mean, he grew up poor, no psychologist. And when he became famous, he was in this storm of publicity. It was only in the 60s when he met his spiritual leader, Larry Geller, that
Mhm.
he began to sort of talk about Jesse to Larry and sometimes other people and sort of work things out. He mentioned it a few times, press and interviews, but again, very, very,
Yeah.
very few. I mean,
Well, there was a quote I actually wrote down from the book, like the difference between a mystic and a madman is that a mystic knows who not to tell.
yeah, that's from Stephen Heller,
Okay.
the Gnostic bishop and writer, Jungian scholar. And it's true because yeah, you know what
Yeah.
happens if you open your mouth. And with Elvis, he also grew up in a conservative Christian background. So he was born with these gifts that he got from Gladys. And these gifts included, again, that she did was seeing visions, seeing spirits.
Wow.
They both could astral travel. They could faith heal. They were born with, or they had some sort of witch blood. We know who knows what the ancestors got it from. I know some say Elvis had
Oh,
Cherokee blood, and but we don't know. But
yeah.
his mother always told him, I'll wash your mouth with soap if you tell people because we'll be, we'll end up in a very bad place.
Yeah.
So Elvis kind of learned to keep his mouth shut. But by the time he was in the army, he started getting more open, talking about reincarnation and other forms of spirituality, confessing to a girlfriend that he could astral travel. But it's not so much that he was hiding, is that he couldn't find anybody to want to talk about it. It
Yeah.
was only in the 60s when he met a spiritual teacher and some other people that it was a more yeah, metaphysical time, if you would, less conservative.
So when did he kind of get introduced to the church?
While he was in the womb, his mother was they were part of the Assembly of God, Pentecostal church. And Gladys, of course, being a psychic, had some bad premonitions when she was pregnant.
Mhm.
So she was going to church every night, and she was dancing and moving around and being gripped by the Holy Spirit and all that. And as scientists have known, twins do dance and play in the womb. And even Elvis mentioned one. It's like, yeah, we were there when I was in the womb, and then every day when I was a child. So it was just he was always being flooded with music and cries of God and prayers and all that. So that right there really shaped his life. And as I write in the book, and scholars have noted this, Pentecostalism is very much like those ancient Greek mysteries or Gnostic traditions where you go into an altered state of mind and you're possessed by a god. In ancient times, it'd be Dionysus or Apollo, but for the Pentecostals, it would be the Holy Spirit, but very,
Mhm.
very similar. And it definitely, what it somebody called it a drugless bacchanalia because other Christian groups did not like the Pentecostals because they said they were mixing sex and Jesus. Because once you got gripped by the Holy Spirit, everyone's
Yeah.
just hitting each other and dancing and
Yeah.
hugging and just going completely crazy. And whenever this happened and everybody started going on the aisles and going into this altered state of mind, in the 40s, it was called rock and rolling. So we
Mhm.
know rock music tapped into that when it came. Certainly Elvis did.
I know he had a bunch of gospel records. They're actually some of my favorite. Do just because they're just like a an energy behind it. Did he carry that with him, like that kind of Pentecostal religious background with him throughout that whole awakening?
I would say he carried the shamanism of it. He
Okay.
knew that the key was to go deep into the essence of the song, what these people were singing about, especially in gospel music. They were singing about being slaves and being lost in this strange land. There were songs about the white farmer and being poor and begging for God for help and all this energy and pain. But there's also this supplication for God to heal them and rescue them from these hard times in this harsh land. The South was not a good place after the Civil War, and certainly not in the
Yeah.
Great Depression.
Um,
It was a terrible place for most people. So Elvis saw that energy and he could feel it and he could go down and he knew these people had gone into the spirit world, they'd alter their consciousness. And he was excellent at tapping into it, bringing it out and making it his own. Like you said, his favorite was gospel. In fact, his 3 Grammys were for gospel. Guy never got a single Grammy or award for his rock music. Even though he was the
yeah.
founder of rock
Yeah.
music,
King of rock or whatever.
but
Yeah.
he loved it, and he also infused that in his normal songs. He just had a way
Hmm.
of going into the spirit world, of getting the essence of the struggles of human beings and their place in this cold world, and understanding the cry out for God and God's assistance.
Yeah, and there's like a realness too behind it because he was like I guess most people in that like spotlight that they might be like clean or whatever, but he is going through like the struggle and he's probably actually crying out, in a way.
Yeah, he knew what it was to be poor. I mean,
Hmm.
there were times where they couldn't have food. They were homeless. They
Yeah.
came from a society of sharecroppers and bootleggers. They're considered the scum of the earth back in those days in the United States. And there were some nights where all they could afford was water and cornbread. That was their dinner. No Christmas presents. Always on being abused by the law and other people, the middle class in that society. It was a hard existence for Elvis, for other whites, for blacks. Anybody in the South was really suffering, and of course, he was suffering because of Jesse. He was suffering because of the abuse of his mother, and he was just trying to find meaning and understand this, and all through this tapping into this energy and doing stuff like going to black gospel churches and going into blues halls and trying to really understand the essence of the South, which included African animism, blues, again, the experiential Christianity and all that, which really came to him into one once he was a teenager and started and created rock music, if you would.
Did he always have like this healing aspect with him?
Oh
Or
yeah, yeah. That was one of his abilities. We don't know anything about it. Did he do it? But that was the one thing that the Pentecostal church had no problem with because it's obviously in the Bible,
yeah.
Jesus and the apostles. So faith healing was important. And there is an instance where he had a really bad tonsillitis. They took him to the doctor in the morning. Doctor says, nothing I can do. They went home and they sat there with his hands on a little Elvis, prayed, and by the afternoon, both the tonsillitis and his fever was gone. So it was certainly part of their life. And later on, when Elvis really got into the occult, he was able to expand it and bring even more power. And he was able to do things like cure heart attacks, broken legs, sore backs, and even little things. I mean, Priscilla says he could heal her headaches at a touch. His grandmother, Minnie May, had arthritis, and he was able to heal her easily. I mean, just over and over. It was just really kind of his side gig, his gig job when he wasn't being a rock star.
So it kind of started at like a young age for him, really.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, he had some sort of witch blood or shaman blood. I don't know what you would call it.
Yeah.
But again, he could astral travel, healing. He had visions and other things. Yeah, he always had one toe dipped into the spiritual world as a child and all through his life till the day he died.
So can you give me a little rundown of his like relationship with Larry Geller and like how they met?
Yeah, he was already leaning towards alternative spirituality, and he was already abandoning evangelical Christianity at the time. By that time, he already accepted reincarnation. He was reading other spiritual books like Khalil Gibran's The Prophet. He was already getting there.
Hmm.
But in the 60s, he became very empty because he still hadn't gotten the answers he wanted out of life. He felt he had not made contact with God in any deep way. He was disillusioned with all the money and the fame and the women, like so it happens to many entertainers. He
Mhm.
was not happy because even though he was getting millions of dollars for doing these kind of campy movies, he was no longer kind of relevant as a musician. This is a time when the Beatles and the Beach Boys and
Yeah.
all that exciting stuff and Bob Dylan is coming up. So he felt empty and but as I say, when the student is ready, the master will appear. And one day his hairdresser gives him a call and says, "Hey, I'm going to start a business. I can't be your hairdresser." And Elvis is like, "Cool." He's in LA. He's like, "Cool. Can you find me somebody?" He said, "Oh, I know this great guy named Larry Geller." So Larry Geller shows up at Elvis's house and he's doing his hair. And you think they would have done small talk, but for some reason, while Larry's doing Elvis's hair in the bathroom, Elvis turns around again. He had an incredible intuition, whether it was Jesse or his psychic powers. But he looked at Larry and said, "Larry, what are you into? What are you really into?" Now, Larry could have said anything. "Oh, I know celebrities and I drive a nice car,"
Mhm.
just small talk Hollywood banter.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, Larry just went, "I'm into mysticism. I'm into the higher questions of God." Not something you tell somebody you've met 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Well, I guess you can, but it's not going to sit well. And suddenly they talked for 4 hours in the bathroom. And the next day, Larry brought him all these books on the occult and started teaching him yoga and meditation and rituals. And Elvis was off to the races. His whole mind expanded. And for, again, the rest of his life, that would be probably just as important as his entertaining career.
Yeah. What year was that?
64.
64? Yeah, wow. That's incredible. Yeah, because so they kind of had like an up and down, I guess, relationship because of his wife.
Because
Oh,
of
gotcha.
everybody, because Elvis turned into this sort of wise, annoying guru. In other words, suddenly it wasn't the parties and the flag football and let's take a plane to Hawaii and all that. Suddenly it
Yeah.
was Elvis like, let's sit around and meditate and contemplate on our karma and the divine consciousness. Oh, instead of giving people like, what do you do? Here's a fleet of motorcycles.
Yeah.
Oh, here's all these books on spirituality. Let's all get in a circle. And he was driving Priscilla and Colonel Parker and the Memphis Mafia and everybody crazy. And in fact, he almost quit. In that period, he quit almost twice. He had to be talked out of it. He wanted to be a Christian monk once and a Hindu monk once.
Oh, wow.
And so, because Elvis was really, supporting an entire city with the millions of dollars he brought in, like NBA stars do or other
Yeah.
artists,
Yeah.
so many people depended on him for all the money he brought in. His spirituality became a threat. So there was a concerted
Yeah.
campaign to stop him or tell him to tone down
Yeah.
his spirituality, and eventually he did to tone it down. He decided, okay, I'm going to come down from the third heaven and marry Priscilla and be more responsible. And but it didn't last very long. I mean, by the time he was, Vegas Elvis, he was already again, deep into the spirituality stuff. He just kept it a little hidden, in his suites in Vegas,
Yeah.
Christmas break, all that. He wasn't so out of control.
When he was going through that like monk phase that you kind of mentioned, I saw like there was like a monk that he met named Adolf,
Yeah,
and he
brother
was like
Adolf.
having a conversation with him.
Yeah, he went to the years before George Harrison started going there. Like I like I write in the book, Elvis was kind of seeding the 60s counterculture because he wasn't hiding it, he wasn't really promoting it, but he was handing out books, talking to
Mhm.
people, actors, producers, directors, what do you think about God? What do you think about Buddhism? What do
Yeah.
you think about Freemasonry? So he was seeding this, but one of the places he did go was Yogananda's ashram, And there he met Yogananda's successor, Dayamata, and she became his kind of second spiritual teacher. And he would spend time there meditating, reflecting, reading, all that. So, yeah, it's a big, beautiful place. And yes, he met this old monk called Brother Adolf. And I'm like, of course, my conspiracy brain is going. It's like, I thought after World War II, nobody would call themselves Hitler or Adolf. You know, those two names were gone. So it's kind of like that's where he went.
So yeah, one thing was also pretty interesting. Like he was I guess a big fan of Manly P. Hall's and was
Huge
actually
fan.
seeking out to meet him at one
Yeah,
point.
he was into so much. I mean, he would, wherever he went, he had workers carrying always 200 books of occult spirituality. And he was very eclectic and very broad. He would be reading alternative Christian works like Gnosticism or the Book of Enoch. He would read books on Taoism, books on numerology, astrology, you name it. And one of them, obviously, in those days, the GOAT, you might say, the Joseph Campbell of their times, or whatever you want to say, was Manly P. Hall. Manly P. Hall was
Mhm.
like a celebrity in those days because his work was so spanning and so penetrating. He brought so much mythology and symbolism and all that. So Elvis loved all of his books, and he wanted to go see his lectures in LA, but Elvis could never go anywhere because he would cause a riot. So he would send Priscilla to write notes, and she hated it. But one time when he was in LA, he sent Larry Geller to get a signed copy, and Larry shows up, and the secretary's, Mr. Hall's too busy, and Larry's like, well, Elvis Presley wants a signed copy, so she goes to get Hall, and Hall stops everything, is like, I'll do it, and he gets one of his books, signs it, gets it to Elvis, and Elvis is so happy. And that day he was at the studio, and he starts at a music studio, and he starts asking all the musicians, well, what do you think about the symbolism of the sun, and what do you think about this myth? And they're all like, dude, we just want to make music. That's how he was. He would just
Yeah.
he would let he'd probably be very happy today on social media because at least he could find people to talk to. Not
Yeah.
back then,
He would have
but
like
then
the coolest podcast, to be
yeah,
honest.
yeah, yeah. We'd appear on podcasts and start talking about stuff. So the other time was he was in LA and he wanted to meet Manley, but unfortunately Hall had a busy schedule and couldn't commit.
Hmm.
So they didn't meet, but he wrote him a very nice note. That was in the 70s when Elvis was no longer in LA doing movies. He just
Hmm.
show up to do an album or an appearance. He most of the time he was in Vegas or Memphis.
When you're kind of doing this type of research, what were more like the fascinating kind of things that stood out to you?
God, there's so much. I mean, he's an endless well of fascination. I would
Yeah.
say his approachability and kindness, because he was always the same good old Southern boy
Yeah.
that he was as a child, how he was raised. Gladys always told him, we're all equal under the eyes of God. Nobody's better than anybody. Yeah. And he was always very courteous, even when you watch him on interviews. Doesn't matter who it is. He's always, sir, ma'am.
Hmm.
And he never saw people himself as better or worse than anybody. And
Wow.
he was always very approachable. I mean, people always talk. If you needed somebody to talk to, he would lend you his ear. If you needed an issue, he would work it out.
Yeah.
And he was so giving. I mean, he would do things like buy people houses. He would pay for people's heart operations. Vets
Mm.
that he went to the army with, he would take care of their therapy. I mean, just over and over, so much kindness. There was a farmer he barely knew who was going to lose his farm because his tractor broke down and he couldn't buy a new one. And Elvis just bought him one on the spot. No questions asked, no strings attached, and over and over. So his kindness and how humble he was, even after being, the most famous person in the world, is just still
Yeah.
very impressive. You don't see that today. Let's put it that way.
Did he actually get into Scientology? Because in the book you kind of get into like Priscilla getting into it. I guess after the divorce. Was he ever into it at all, or was he just like kind of like looking into it?
No, that's the one religion he hated.
Really?
Yeah, he thought he loved all religions equally, all myths equally,
Hmm.
all tradition. He thought anybody searching for God is all right with him,
Yeah.
regardless of the mistakes you make and the blind spots you have. He respected that because he thought that was the greatest service, or that's why humans were here. But he called Scientology godless, and he thought they were just a business. And as Fred said, he avoided them like a cobra, because when he was in the 60s and early 70s in LA, they were making huge inroads, and of course they're coming to Elvis for money and attention, and he turned them down
Yeah.
immediately. But once he was gone, I think, yeah, they did get so powerful in the 80s and so forth that they got a lot of these celebrities, yeah, including Priscilla and Lisa Marie for a
Wow.
long time.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. So, so is that how he kind of saw everything? Like, just he was kind of looking into all religions.
Yeah, when he got into the occult, that's how he was. He was
Yeah,
reading all traditions. I mean, he even studied Mormonism, Greek Orthodoxy.
yeah,
He was always looking for their take, and he
yeah,
would sort of adopt it to him and speculate, let it seep in.
yeah.
So yeah, there was not one. Yeah, all religions he pretty much studied and respected, and
Was
tried to find the wisdom of the people there, their struggles, their insights, and so forth.
yeah, was that kind of hard for him at the time? Like, because I mean, today it's like easy, like technology, you can kind of like pull up, like, hey, what is Hinduism or what is Buddhism, or listen to an audiobook.
Well, when you're a multimillionaire,
Yeah.
it's not that hard because
Oh,
he
yeah,
just
but
he just skipped to get Larry, and
yeah,
Larry was really a polymath. He was initiated in all these secret societies and Buddhist theologies. So Larry had the avenues, and Elvis just wrote him a check and just said, "Bring me books, bring me books." And
yeah,
he was a voracious reader. He could read many
yeah.
books a night, write notes and everything. So yeah, like I said, for somebody like Elvis, it wasn't that hard.
Yeah, no, I wasn't doubting it. I just think it shows like the enthusiasm behind it all. So did that like blue light, can you explain like how they like followed him throughout his life?
Yeah, that was a really startling insight
Hmm.
because yeah, blue was very important. It was whenever he was healing or astral traveling or manipulating the weather or moving objects, whatever he was doing, he would summon the blue light. And this is before he knew about it. Because it wasn't, he had a UFO experience on Graceland where he saw the flying saucers and his dad was there. And his dad remembered.
Damn.
Or the aliens decided it was time for him to remember, or his dad suddenly, you know, the things in the sky sparked something. So he told Elvis about it, and Elvis was like, "Oh my God, am I an alien?" Because yeah, blue was always there as an energy form. Blue was somehow his favorite color. I mean, if you look at his songs and movies, Blue Hawaii, GI Blues,
Yeah,
all that,
true.
blue is everywhere in his life. And sometimes it seems unconscious. And Elvis was kind of freaked out about it. And yeah, the alien blue light was there. And I give a lot of instances in the book. And of course, I talk about blue is very important even in ufology when you these spacecrafts and these alien apparitions, a majority of the time there's blue involved, blue flames, blue figures. Even Whitley Strieber, when he talks in communion about going seeing the visitors, there's a blue light around there. So it's all over in ufology. It's all over in religion and magic. Krishna was blue and all these other instances. And blue is, of course, a fascinating color. Like that's a color that we had to discover. I think 3,000 years ago, it didn't even exist.
Wow.
When Homer's talking in the Odyssey about the sky, he says wine colored. When you go to and you go to the
Wow.
Hindu scriptures, all these others, they do not have a color for blue. We had to invent it, or it had to appear by some power. And even blue-eyed people, blue eyes is not natural to human beings. It's something that appeared through a trauma or a disease like 3,000 years ago that scarred part of human DNA, and that's how we get blue and green-eyed people. So blue is a very interesting color.
Yeah. There's like also like this Captain Marvel and King Solomon reference. You giving me a rundown on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, comic books was very important to Elvis. And again, he was such an innovator ahead of the curve when it came to either martial arts, spirituality, music, and comic books, because we have to remember that today comic books are mainstream, but when Elvis was a kid, that was for the filth. Comic books were considered edgy, they were considered immoral. They were banned in places like Louisiana and even in California for a while. It was not what you think today.
Yeah.
And But he loved comic books because he loved the fantasy of it. And one of his favorite one was Captain Marvel, the DC Captain Marvel, not the one we know today from the movies.
Hmm.
But this is the Captain Marvel that today most people associate with Shazam. Saying Shazam, and Elvis really became enamored because you had this figure that was a normal human, and through some magic incantation, because a wizard gives the magic word Shazam to Freddie Freeman and I think Billy Batson, and turns him into this giant figure larger than life. And Elvis was inspired because he said, maybe I could transform into something like that. And Shazam, he could have liked Superman or Batman or all of those, but he picked Shazam, which is the most magical of all the figures because, again, it's a wizard, gives this magical power, and Shazam encompasses the names of all these arcane figures like Solomon and Hercules and Hermes and Zeus and all that. I mean, even Jack Kirby said he based Thor on Captain Marvel because he thought it was the most pagan figure he could think of. And it was really, again, very much like Jesse and Jesus, the mystic Jesus. It was a huge inspiration and drive for Elvis all of his life. When you look at his Vegas outfits, the short cape and the high collar, you realize he's dressing up like Shazam.
Do you think you might have been like performing like a type of magic or like a ritualistic or ceremonial type of magic, either behind the scenes or maybe on stage?
Without a doubt, yeah. I mean, look, if you look at the timeline, you've got Rockabilly Elvis, right? And he's shaking his hips and
Mm.
all natural, and nothing's on
Yeah.
purpose. Even his, hiccups in Heartbreak Hotel, it's all coming from within.
Hmm.
Something is gripping him. And then he becomes Vegas, a movie star Elvis. And he's kind of like Adam Sandler was in the 90s and the early 2000s, right? Remember
Hmm.
Adam Sandler would put out this funny but dumb movie every year or two,
Yeah.
and it would make a ton of money and all that. That's how Elvis was. And
Hmm.
he was one of the top three or four Hollywood stars in the 60s. As bad as they all made a profit. You can't name one actor today that could say that, but all of his movies
Yeah.
made money. So he becomes Army Elvis for 2 years, then movie star Elvis. Then he just reinvents himself as this kind of space age shaman alien kind of character. And it has to be influenced by his occultism because
Yeah.
again, he's dressing up like Captain Marvel and he's got the some nights he's got the Aztec emblem, sometimes the ancient Egyptian, and he's playing the theme from 2001 A Space Odyssey. He's wearing an Egyptian ankh and a mystic Jewish pendant, and there are times people have said he would stop and do like a Tibetan prayer in between songs. And he's doing martial arts because remember, like comic books, martial arts was not mainstream. It was considered fringe in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
But there's Elvis doing this very, oh my God, the mainstream, audacious, foreign exercise. Elvis really opened the door for people like Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris because he made it cool to do these things. So he's putting together this again sort of space messiah, space age guy. And yes, he's singing, American tunes, but that's the thing. He's tapping into the American spirit, and he's singing country and bluegrass. He's bringing again like the shamanism of what it is to be an American, and he's putting it all together in his Vegas shows. And yeah, proof is in the pudding. He just people would just go crazy and go into altered states of mind and all that. So yeah, there's no doubt that he was expressing his mysticism with his Vegas persona in the 70s.
Yeah, when you brought up Egypt, so did he like choose to live in Memphis for like any specific reason or
No,
like
no, basically his parents wanted to make more money. They were tired of being destitute. So
oh got you.
the the Great World War II was ending or had ended. The economy was starting to look better. So they just went to a bigger city to find more opportunity. They still lived in the projects for a long time. And it was only when Elvis was like a teenager and he started working and Gladys could work that they started living anything close, anything that could resemble a lower middle class life. But again, it's interesting because, yeah, Memphis in Tennessee, all cities and locations are named either after Civil War figures or Native American figures. But somehow they named it after this ancient capital
Yeah.
in
Of
Egypt.
Egypt.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and Memphis is the Greek name for in Egyptians Al Twani, which means the land, the place between two lands. And it's interesting because Memphis, when Elvis there, was the people said it was the crossroads. It was the place
Yeah.
of north and south, jazz and blues, white and black. It was this crossroads. And as I show in the book, Elvis is kind of the Lord of the Crossroads. And he had to move to a place with an Egyptian name. And yeah, ancient Egyptian mysteries and mysticism also followed Elvis all through his life, as much as the blue light and ufology. He wore an ankh all his life. He had all these rituals where he would summon a pyramid with Jesus, and he would use that for magical rituals. He wanted to get married in a pyramid shaped church when he was older, and over and over. And of course, Shazam has a lot of Egyptian motifs and all that. So yeah, Egypt magic is there. And of course, he read the Gnostic Gospels. The original Gnostics came out of Egypt, and so forth.
Yeah. Did he kind of consider it like a type of magic or like a Solomonic type of magic? Like when he was contacting his brother or coming in communication with him?
I don't think he called it anything. It was just a
Yeah.
vision. Yeah, I don't think he had anything. I mean, obviously, when he met Larry, he learned to meditate. He
Hmm.
learned to do yoga and some other techniques that improved his psychic abilities and his vision. So, unfortunately, the pills probably kind of dull that. The drugs, it happens.
Yeah.
Happens with a lot of rock stars.
Helps the performance on stage, but probably fucks up the meditation for sure when you're just completely wired like that. But yeah, did some of that like spirituality stuff start to like unravel towards the end of his life as like drugs kind of started to take over?
No, he was always very committed. Even the day he died, he was reading books, practicing magic, and so forth. When he died, he had a book on called The Face of Jesus, which was about the Shroud of Turin. So it's kind of
Mhm.
symbolic. When he died, he was looking at Jesus in the face when you look at it symbolically. So he was
Mhm.
always, days before he died, he was reading. He was again telling Larry, "Can you go get me these books?" It was spirituality was always important to him. He was always seeking. A seeker never stops seeking. He's
Yeah.
always, no, regardless of what's happening to his body, regardless of his life falling apart, it doesn't matter. He's always seeking, and it's not that rare when you think about it. I mean, these figures are carrying great loads. They are wounded. They are broken. They're trying to figure things out because of their trauma,
Hmm.
and in many ways, they're carrying the force of their followers. I mean, Aleister Crowley died a heroin addict. Edgar Casey died because, or he found that the responsibility was so much with his following, it broke him. Krishnamurti is said to have died very depressed. Alan Watts died an alcoholic. I mean, it's
Hmm.
not the idea that you're going to be lifted up in some white
Yeah.
lotus doesn't, it's that's kind of an exception. It's not the rule.
Yeah.
I mean, look what happened to Jesus.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, yeah, I feel like I suppose losing yourself in like that kind of spiritual world while you're here, I guess, on Earth, you kind of forget about your body and your health and you kind of lose yourself in a way. And was there anything like symbolic you found about his death, like the king dying on the toilet throne?
Well, that's symbolic. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that the whole day was symbolic, and I break it down. I mean, again, the color blue was there. He was wearing blue pajamas. I think
Yeah.
the song was Blue Eyes Crying in Kentucky. I can't remember, but it had to have blue. Um, it was all there from the day. And he even pretty much predicted it. He was doing things like changing his will. He was telling Larry things like, angels fly because they don't take themselves lightly. He was doing these documents and saying it's not going to end like you want, Larry, and it freaked Larry out. It was just, it's like he knew that his time was up and he was dropping hints. And the biggest one was 2 days before he died what August 16th. On August 14th, his stepbrother David Stanley came to talk to him, and Elvis is in his bed, and of course he's reading all books on the occult.
Mhm.
And by then his body was failing. He had glaucoma. He could barely see. He had gut problems. He was he always had health problems. Unfortunately, the pills they help until they stop helping. That's what drugs do, right? And then they become
Yeah.
your worst enemy. So
Yeah.
that's what was happening too. So, but he's reading, he's trying to figure things out, and he tells David, in 2 days I'm going to be on a different plane. And his stepbrother goes, "Oh yeah, in 2 days we got to take a plane to Portland for a concert. We better not miss it." And Elvis like just rolls his eyes like you don't get it, gives him a hug, says I love you, and then in 2 days he was on a different plane. So all that, and yeah, it's in the book, but he knew that this material form he had, or this karmic journey, was coming to an end.
Was that like the ability to like just want to keep learning? Was that always in him
Yeah.
from the start?
Keep looking for answers. He was, like I said, he's a seeker. You're
Yeah.
always seeking, whether it's through ritual, through reading, to talking to people. I mean, the quest doesn't end until your last breath.
You kind of brought up like how it's like how he could read people really well and possibly tying that into his I guess his twin like losing his brother. I just recently watched a Joe Rogan interview. He had Oz Perlman on. He's like a mentalist. He said that he had lost a brother in the womb or like a twin brother
Oh,
when he was in
really?
the womb and he's like reading people's minds. I mean it was kind of crazy. I was literally watching this the other night while I was kind of reading your book, and I was kind of like noticing a slight similarity.
Yeah, yeah, I'd like to talk to him because I know I saw the clip where he guesses Rogan's pin number, but that's
Yeah,
all I saw.
crazy, man.
I
Yeah,
can't do 3 hours of
yeah,
anybody.
it's
It's just,
yeah,
but that's the part I saw. So yeah, I would love to reach out to him and see. Yeah, I'm sure
yeah,
he has a whole story. I'm sure his twin is a huge part of his life, and I'm sure the gifts came from the trauma of losing your twin brother. So that's fascinating. Fascinating. Yeah.
yeah. He kind of like briefly mentions like esoteric, and then kind of gets cut off in a way and doesn't like bring up anything similar to that for the rest of the conversation. Like as he's like kind of bringing up his influence in that. So I found that kind of super interesting and just yeah,
Hmm.
just thought I'd ask. But I saw one of the Beach Boys just died. Do you know anything about like them and their connection to like Charles Manson? I know it's
Yeah,
like
bro.
completely random, but
Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, Brian Wilson died, but his brother Dennis was friends with Manson, and that's a whole story. Yeah, I would. What's his name? Tom O'Neill's Chaos. God, that's a good book.
I've got to
You
check that
have
out.
you
Yeah.
have to read it. I mean, and you don't find the answers because he starts as a skeptic, but
Hmm.
at the end he's like, okay, you got CIA, you got occultism, you got the mafia, and it's all hovering over you, and I can't come with a final conclusion, but I know all these things are true. But yeah, and the official narrative is bunk, but
Yeah.
it's an incredible book, and yeah, Elvis did go visit the Tate household after the murders
Oh
because
shit.
Elvis was obsessed with. He loved, like any shaman, he loved things like cemeteries and dark places
Mhm.
because he just, it's an interesting energy. So he did show up there. Um, but yeah, that's wild. I mean, I know when people in my circles don't want to hear it, but Manson certainly had a Gnostic religion. It's so obvious. And it's not controversial because he just came up with his own idea. And these ideas were because uh, what's Herman Hesse was very popular in Southern
Mhm.
California at the time. And yeah, Brian Wilson, Dennis Wilson, all these counterculture figures loved Hermann Hesse from his God, who's the band that sings Born to Steppenwolf? Again, the band Steppenwolf.
Yeah.
That's one of his novels, but he has a novel called Damien, which talks about this Gnostic god called Abraxas and this philosophy. Hesse got it from Carl Jung because Hesse was a patient of Carl Jung. Carl Jung wrote the Seven Sermons of the Dead, where he talks about Abraxas and all this. So it got passed down from, the ancient Gnostics to Jung to Hermann Hesse to Manson. And by the time like a telephone game, by the time it gets to Manson, he thinks that Abraxas is about killing and all that matters is knowing yourself and, evil and good are just illusions and all this, it's Gnostic, but it's so twisted. It's so
Yeah.
twisted, but that's what drove the guy. It's pretty
Yeah.
scary. So,
Yeah,
and
was he a pretty good musician? He was apparently jamming with some of those dudes.
yeah, he
Like,
certainly was. And I think what people don't want to know because it's been so hidden, but it's not like he had like a group of crazy girls and guys like in the Tarantino film or something. He
mhm.
had he might have had between 200 and 500 followers.
Holy
And
shit.
we're talking an army of fanatics. And then you go, how did this loser who spent all his time in jail have so much power? Military, CIA, some occult. Did the Gnostic magic work for him? So it's so fascinating. In the book Chaos, it's like I feel we've just begun with it. But yeah,
Yeah.
Manson is fancy, and yeah, of course, the Beach Boys. Unfortunately, we're part of this darkness.
Yeah. Do you think there was like an MK Ultra aspect to like the Manson thing, or I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, was it Haight Park in San Francisco where Manson and
Oh,
his
Haight
fam?
Ashbury?
Yeah, Haight
Or
Ashbury. Sorry. I mean, there was CIA military hospitals and doctors there, no
damn.
doubt. I mean, it's so confirmed. We
Yeah.
don't have that verifiable journalistic
Gotcha.
proof.
Yeah.
But there's a storm of CIA, MK Ultra, occultism, government powers, honeypots, and it all goes into like storms or falls into Charles Manson in that area.
Yeah, and it's kind of crazy. Like through rock and roll, there's like a ton of like occult symbolism and all of that, and some of the sounds that you're kind of hearing are, just yeah, just kind of trippy initiative. I don't know. It's like there's a lot there.
Yeah,
It's like
it could
super.
all be just a MK Ultra apparatus. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's for sure. I'm sure part of it truly is. We have evidence. I mean, for example, I know I did a whole show with Steven Snyder, Recluse, and we wanted to see if we could find if the CIA, well, there was no CIA back then, but whatever was there, or
Hmm.
any of the other power brokers could have gone to him, and we got nothing. He really was completely innovative, free, you know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
doing his thing. But then you go and you see that the Beatles, it's really kind of heartbreaking because what they did is they imitated Elvis's vibe. For example, you see the girls going nuts with Elvis,
Hmm.
completely natural. He had a way of just
Yeah.
turning women into Maenads, Dionysian Maenads, and getting the crowd to go crazy. But when you see that with the Beatles, these are all paid actors. They were not women screaming for the Beatles like you
Oh,
see in
really?
television. Yeah, and even
Damn.
the charts, a lot of the charts, the first charts of the Beatles was all manufactured. Again,
Yeah.
they saw what worked with Elvis and they try to repeat it with the Beatles,
Yeah.
and
Kind
that's
of
how
fake
they
the
got.
success.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I love the White Album. I love Rubber Soul. I think maybe when the Beatles got into drugs, they got free. I don't know.
Yeah.
John Lennon certainly got free because, he got into trouble with the powers. Elvis had to help him when he was about to be deported and all that.
Yeah. What happened with all that? I don't. Um.
Well, John Lennon was he was because he was the usual. If you're anti-war, you're going to get
Oh,
whacked.
got yeah.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
like Martin Luther King Jr. and all those. And Lennon was so out of control that they were going to kick him out of the country. You're an illegal alien, kick him out of the country. But he wanted to be in New York, so
Yeah.
he thought he was in trouble. and he called Elvis and I said, "Can you help me?" And Elvis is like, "Dude, just don't talk about drugs. Don't badmouth the government. Just act cool, man. Act cool." And Lennon
Yeah.
took his advice and they left him alone, even though Elvis had turned on the counterculture years before. He met the Beatles in the 60s and they had a good time. But later he got really sour because he got tired of the Vietnam War. He got tired of the hippies. And he was very vocal about the Beatles and the hippies. And he thought they were doing more damage than good and all that. But he did help Lennon when Lennon asked him.
Saying, yeah, and I mean the Beatles have like that seems like a weird twist to them as well. I mean, having Aleister Crowley and stuff on their album cover and all of that. That's
Remember the White Album? That's what Manson said inspired him to go on his killings and do his apocalyptic revolution. So
oh
there is a
really?
Manson connection. Yeah. That's
Damn.
why he had his followers write piggies on the walls in Sharon Tate's Blood because it was based on the song Little Piggies in the White Album. He claimed that the White Album was a coded message to start a revolution where whites and blacks would fight and create this end of the world scenario in the United States. Yeah, real
Damn.
crazy
He
stuff.
was out of it.
Yeah, cult leaders. I mean, now they're finding out Jim Jones might have been MK Ultra the whole time.
Yeah, that's something that has been fascinating to find out because people are like bringing up that they possibly took them all down to, South America to kill them on purpose because they were test subjects, which who knows if that's true or not.
Hey, we'll be talking about this forever. I mean, people are still talking about JFK, and in my circles, people are still talking about Elvis's death. And we'll be talking about it in 20 years. We'll talk about it tomorrow. It's
Yeah.
just enjoy the ride, as Bill Hicks said.
Yep.
That's all you
Well,
got to do.
how do you see how do you see his death and where do you like think he is technically right now? Or,
I think he left his material body. I
yeah.
don't think he faked his death.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, in his profession, with Colonel Parker, he was probably connected to the mob in some ways. It's
Yeah.
just the way you do business in Vegas, that's just a reality. There's no record companies are also run by the mob in those days. So, but he also had connections with military and intelligence because of his military background, because he was so friendly and he gave so much money to the government and all that.
Okay.
So he kind of he wandered in both circles, but I don't. And some say he might have gone to witness protection. There was some shady deals that happened with him, but it had nothing to do with him. It's more to do with his dad. So I don't see any faking death.
Yeah.
There are rumors that maybe he got killed. After all, if one, what's the famous trope that if the mob wants you dead, but they want to send a message, they'll either put a mouse in your mouth or they'll kill you while you're going to the bathroom because it's humiliating, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
there are many instances, and foreign governments do that too. It's supposed to be, it sends a message and it's a horrible way to die.
Yeah.
So that's the rumor, although I don't know how they would get to Elvis. He was, unless it was an inside job. It's, again,
Yeah.
he had a huge security, and getting to Elvis was almost impossible. No assassin could have gone to Elvis. He was always armed to the teeth. He had 4 black belts. He always had many bodyguards for a reason, because he always had issues with death threats, blackmailing threats. He was attacked many times. So he always had good, very good security around him. So unless it was an inside job, I don't think they could have gotten to Graceland. An assassin couldn't have gotten into Graceland. No way.
Yeah.
But I think he, no, I think he left the building personally because the one reason which makes sense that somebody told me is that Elvis would have never, never, never left Lisa Marie or his dad. He just wouldn't have done that. He would have taken them with him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But he wouldn't have just gone lived a life on his own without his daughter.
Yeah.
It's just not the way he was brought up, and it would have killed him. So that's why I don't think he faked his death.
Yeah, well, that makes a ton of sense, like considering his character as a human being. So,
Yeah, he always did the right thing for his family, no matter
yeah.
what.
Well, I'll end it with that, man. I really, really appreciate your time. Again, would you like to let everybody know where to find you?
Yeah, just go to my name, miguelconner.com, miguelconner.com. And yeah, you'll find two roads. There's the roads to my Gnostic podcast, and then there's a road to the Elvis book. My Elvis, I have a podcast on music, social media, contact forms, and
Oh, cool.
you can get the book in many places. You can get an ebook, audiobook, or just get a physical copy.